Hello, I'm Phillip White. So happy to be here with you this evening. And Warren and we are here for a very specific purpose in regard to this podcast that we were very very fortunate to be asked to be part of. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about me, and we'll go in more detail about the overall objective of this podcast, which is titled "White Feather Counsel of Men." As I said, my name is Phillip White. I'm pretty much have been in the field of social work, worked a lot with men in group settings over many years doing my public service work. In August of 2017, the city of Charlottesville was, what's the proper term I can use, was engulfed with the United Right March there in Charlottesville, which kind of stemmed from this group having issues with the city decision to remove a Confederate statue from a local park. That incident turned into a nationwide focus point over the violence and the power and control that certain people seem to have or want to have or keep, that put a national spotlight on the city of Charlottesville. It resulted in death and many injuries that had happened to some of the citizens there in Charlottesville. And it was from that incident that Patricia Turner decided to do something to try to bring some sense of healing to the citizens of Charlottesville. Her work with the pastor of Trinity, Pastor Cass Bailey, and she being the coordinator, the director of the church reconciliation department there at the church, it fit her sense of purpose almost perfect. And she went about trying to figure out how to go about addressing this issue that she felt pretty much connected almost 100% to the world of men. And her knowing the work I was doing here in Central Virginia with men, she reached out to me to consider being part of this work that we're doing here today. I had no idea in reference to how it was going to unfold, but I think when you just trust your gut, and I have so much faith in her, that that's what got me to where I am right now, being here. And I was just so fortunate to be able to meet Warren Hammonds, which you're going to hear from him in a moment. And we have developed this relationship that I would have never saw coming. But it's a matter of when you put yourself out there as a public servant, you don't know where it's going to take you. You just got to have faith that wherever you go, it's going to result in something that's good. So I see this as a privilege. I see this as an honor. It's part of that plan. I think each of us in life, we have a plan. I call it that spiritual plan that we have that's been given to us at birth. We just got to get out of the way and don't mess it up. And I think that has led me to be right here, right now at this stage in my life. And I'm just so grateful to have that opportunity to be able to be part of this very important work here. This is important work, primarily for men to be able to come together, be transparent, be able to address some of our long-standing historical struggles, as well as our victories. We have a lot of victories. We have a lot of good things that we have and we'll continue to do. But we do have some issues we need to take a very hard, personal, introspective look at as to how we can be better people, how we can be better soldiers, how we can be better brothers, and how we can be just better people in reference to us helping this country reach that objective that we hear a lot of politicians always talking about, how we become a perfect union. Well, this is our opportunity, man, to work towards that together. So I think us together, and Warren and I, we don't have all the answers. We're just putting it out there. Many of you that may come on this site, you may have some answers that we don't have. But that's the beauty of what we're trying to do here. We're going to work at this thing together to make this place we call America a better place for all of us. So looking forward to being able to engage you and get as much knowledge from you as well as what we can give to you as a whole. So I'm going to pass it over to Warren now.
Well, thank you, Phil, and thank you for that intro of the whole purpose of why we're here. I do want to say that one of our main purposes tonight is to, on this first session, to at least let you all know what brings us here and why we think what we're doing is important. So that's what we're doing here tonight. Right. I must say that I'm very excited to be here as part of this. I feel fortunate and honored to be a part of it. I think it can be a hard effort that we're going to do, but it's a needed effort, a needed dialogue, right. And it might be a journey for us. And I hope that some of you all will make the journey with us. I'm an ordained Baptist minister and was in formal ministry positions for about 25 years. For the last 20 or 25 years, I have been in hunger relief, nonprofit management, and leadership. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't really bring me here, but that's quickly of my background. I'll tell you a few things about what does bring me here and why I'm excited about my part in this with you, Phil. Because there have been some formative moments in my life that I think I can look back on and say, here's a lot of why I am here now and why I want to be invested in this. I was born in 1959, so I do not remember early years of the 60s. I was a little too young for that. However, I do remember growing up in Atlanta in a household with parents who made sure that we four children knew the importance of treating everybody with respect and knowing that everybody deserved being treated with dignity. Mm-hmm. I remember my parents reinforcing that time and time again as I was young and as I was growing up. I also feel fortunate that I grew up in Atlanta, Martin Luther King's home place. Mm-hmm. So during my high school years, I do remember a lot more discussion, a lot more involvement with my African-American friends, with what was going on in our lives, the difference between my world being white and their world not being white. I remember attending Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. Was a member for many years, was a co-pastor with others. With it, of course, his dad was a pastor there when he was growing up there. I remember from my childhood images of the 60s, not real early on, but I remember coffee table books being out. I remember images on the TV of seeing the cruelty, the injustice that, ironically, many times I saw that the police and leaders were a part of this. Yeah. And that impressed upon me. So those were some memories early on. I have one key experience after I went to seminary. About a year or two after, I was in my first ministry position, and I attended a 3 to 4 day very intense program in Atlanta. So I went back home, and it was done by an organization that no longer exists, I don't believe now. It was called the National Coalition Building Institute, and their purpose was to build leaders who could talk about racial injustices, that could talk about personal differences in order to bridge those gaps. So I remember being in this, and one of the first experiences they asked us to participate in was what you call a privilege walk. And you people out there, if you don't know what privilege walk is, just Google it, look it up, privilege walk. You'll get a list of questions that are asked. They're not biased questions. They're cultural or societal related questions that are just out there that make you respond to yes or no. And I'm going to give you a few of these questions that were raised to me in the privilege walk. So all of us participants, about 20 people overall, were asked to do this privilege walk. So we all started out on one line right in the middle of the room. And we were asked questions such as, if one or both of your parents graduated from college, take one step forward. If you knew since you were a child that it was assumed you would go to college, take one step forward. If you or your family never had to move due to financial inabilities, take a step forward. These were some of the step forward questions, and there were 20 or 30 more.
Mm-hmm.
This walk was about 60 questions long. A couple of the other type questions were, if you have ever been the only person of your race or ethnicity in a classroom or place of work, take a step backwards. If you grew up in an economically disadvantaged or single-parent home, take one step back. So these weren't judgmental questions.
Right.
These were just how you grew up,
Right.
what your experience was like.
Right.
Or if you've ever been called names regarding or because of your race, your class, your gender, take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the end of the privilege walk, myself, along with the other one or two Caucasian attendees, were well ahead of everyone else. Mm-hmm. Well ahead, not just 2 or 3 or 5 steps, but 20 steps, 15 steps, well ahead. And I remember being confronted then with what it was like to live in that white cocooned world that I lived in. Yeah. I think I had a good background. I think my parents raised me correctly. However, I do think I brought a little naivete into the world. And I wasn't aware of that sort of cocooned existence that I had until then. That made a big impression on me. And that's when the term white privilege became not just a term for me, but a construct and something that I had to deal with. Another main event was not just an event, but how I then began to address those kind of concerns in the ministry positions that I did hold. And so over time, I devoted myself to other workshops, to other seminars, to other conferences, even participated in leadership of some of those, so that we could actually talk about these issues of race, of what kept us apart, of what was disenfranchising within America and things like that. And so through this, I became more sensitized to people's stories. One of the things that then helped, so not just my background, not just that experience with National Coalition Building Institute, but hearing stories of people who were hurt, who were in pain, who were traumatized. Sorry to say, but partly because of the world that I helped create, because I was in that white world, and that's what was causing that division. And I remember it gripped me to the core. It hit me at the core when I heard those personal stories of pain and grief and trauma. So that's some of what brings me. Some very good things in my childhood, but some things that sort of formed and made me rethink some issues and to bring me to this point. So let's take a quick turn. That's sort of what brings us. We'd like to comment for a few minutes about why we think what we're doing here tonight and over the next weeks and months, and who knows how long, why we think this is important. It's critical. It's opportunistic time. And, you know, I probably didn't learn enough Greek. I probably didn't remember enough from my seminary days, but I remember one kind of thing from my Greek classes, and that they have several different words that we use for other different words now. And they have 2 words for time. One is chronos, and that's the ticking away of time. So the tick by tick. Chronology is where we get that from. But the other word for time is kairos. And kairos is more of the quality of time. And kairos is about the nowness. Kairos is about what we ought to be doing now, the opportune time of now for life, for doing something. Right. And I do think it is time for a change. I think for things to really change, we need to be in sincere and open dialogue. For things to really change, I think whites need to come to terms with some of the words that we may not want to confront on a daily basis, like white privilege, like restorative justice, like how we are a part of power and oppression. Even if we don't do it or put it out there directly, we're a part of it because systemic racism is a problem. So we need to be challenged from the past, as far back as the slave trade. We don't have to unpack all of that, but we need to know that maybe oppression and maybe that power started even then, and that's part of what brings us. When you deal with ideas of ownership and control and power, we have to walk back those steps. We need to be challenged even from a more recent past. I mean, listen to the names that just within the past year or so have flooded the news. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Tony McDade, just to name a few. And that list could go on and on. It's time to address some of these concerns, and I think it's a good time to do that. In my 25 years of service, of all of the years that I've worked for 19 different supervisors, direct supervisors. Every one of them have been white out of 19. That's what we call systemic racism. Now, did those things happen because everyone in those systems were racist? No, I'm not saying that. But that was the system. And we have to own that it's power-oriented, that it's dominated and it's controlled by us. And we need to get beyond that, and not to put a guilt trip on everybody, but to realize that we are part of the world that has created this disenfranchisement and this oppression, and that we need to come to grips with that. I have a little book of quotes that I like to refer to. John Tucker was a director of a racial and reconciliation group up in Vermont. And in 1997, now that's 25 or so years ago, he said this: "Until you talk about power and privilege, you cannot talk about change. It's hard for white Americans to deal with their own racism." He's not calling all whites racist. He's just saying we need to come to grips with how our power, our privilege has impacted this world. So I hope that this podcast will create a place for us to dialogue in an open and honest and transparent way on matters that matter, on matters such as systemic racism and why men have trouble talking to each other about that. A place to lead the healing, and I think we need to all be comfortable in being vulnerable and know that healing and reparation of our hurts is part of the reason why we're here. So I'll leave it with that and maybe turn it over to you for a little bit about why you think it's important that we're here. But my hope is always leading toward hope and toward healing and toward reconciliation and toward a coming together, even if it's dealing with the hard issues.
Yeah. That's thank you, Juan. Thank you for being so personal and so transparent about. As you were talking, I was having a moment of reflection as you was talking, and you were naming some of the people that we have lost here in America for their interactions with law enforcement. My son, I have two children, both of them are young adults. He commutes from Richmond to Norfolk State University, working on his graduate degree in social work. And he left this morning to go to Norfolk. And I always have this moment when he's driving that he doesn't have any encounters with police officers. You know, it's kind of like within our communities, you have these rules on how you need to conduct yourself if you get stopped. So it's one of those survival things that the group of people that identify themselves as Black, Afro-American, that probably multitudes of families have had to have this kind of talk with our children. primarily with our sons, because I think even though now we're having young ladies being hurt or killed or all kinds of stuff happening to them, it does let us that sense of living within a system that has such historical roots in oppression, privilege, and you're always trying to find your way to get around it, get over it, get under it, become part of it. And it always seemed to be, if I think it was Thomas Jefferson that made this comment about at some point America going to have to come to reckons with their original sin, which was basically slavery. And I don't know if we really to this day have been able to really put that out there and address it in a more open, transparent, honest way. Because all of that. It's hard to believe that we did that to people, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And even down to the the U.S. Constitution that was created by a privileged group. It was all men. For one, not a woman nowhere in the room, and all white men.
Yeah.
So basically it was created for them.
Yeah.
Because back then when they did the Constitution, you had to be a landowner. So there was a lot of folks that didn't own land, but you had to be a landowner.
Yeah.
For whatever reason that meant something. Like what does that mean? But it goes back to that sense of wealth and certain economic advantages and things like that. And I was just having all kinds of flashbacks as you was talking about my own journey to this stage in my life. And you attended integrated schools. I didn't.
Yeah. My high school was about 60% African American, 40% white during my high school years. So it was actually a little bit of I was actually a little bit of the minority.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And see, that's just so interesting because my entire from kindergarten, elementary, we call it middle school now. We call it junior high and high school back in my day. It was 100% black.
Yeah.
The entire. Now, my senior year in high school, we started to have a trickle of white students to come in. I didn't know any. Now, I played football in high school, and I was the captain. I was one of the captains on the team. And some time ago, I was looking at our high school yearbook, and I realized we had about 4 or 5 white teammates on the team. I didn't know any of them on the team.
Yeah.
I had no interaction at all with any of them, but they were on the team, and a part of me felt a little bad about that. I was a co-captain of the team, and I did not know these guys. Had no clue that they were on the team, but they were.
Yeah.
And then and I graduated from high school, and I was fortunate went on to the HBCU, and there too there was some white students, but mostly it was probably 98% black population. So my really first baptism into significant engagement with white America didn't happen until I started doing social work as a professional. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. And so it's like, did I lose something by not having engagement early on? Or was I more prepared by the time I came out of college?
Yeah, it could be thought of as either way. I do feel fortunate that I had a lot of African American friends. We didn't spend a lot of time at each other's homes, but some. I know I had my white friends over more than them, and they probably had their African American friends, black friends, more than I did, but more over to their house than me. But around the schoolyard, baseball practice, other sports that we participated in together, we would hang out together. Do feel fortunate with that, but even outside of that, I still realized that I was still in looking back, I was still living in my own safe white world. I was fortunate to have those relationships. I think that sensitized me a little bit more to what could be the cases out there and what could be happening. But I remember sometimes, just general playing on the playground, maybe waiting on the playground after baseball practice, and police would drive by. And I don't remember vividly, but I can remember anxiety on the part of my African-American friends. And to me, it was like probably my buddies were passing by. I didn't know them really, but I processed it differently, just as you were just saying. And I didn't have to teach my son, to what to do in case a policeman comes up, because they were in our system. They were friends. Even if we didn't know them, we didn't have to fear them. So I think that even is part of the dynamic that we're working with here. What brings us is our differences, but what we need to do is to be open about sharing those and collectively dealing with why that is. We don't have to rehash everything. We don't have to make all the white people out there feel guilty about everything, but we do have to realize that we are part of that. I think one of the difficulties, you said, we haven't really dealt with slavery well. I think one of the reasons we haven't is because, the last 20 or 30 years, there's been a lot of people probably like me that would have said, I was never a part of that, so it's beyond, I don't have to deal with it. I didn't cause it. And yeah, true, I didn't directly impact, but because it happened and because it was a white-controlled and white power and dominated society, I do have to deal with it. So yes, I am a part of it, even though I wasn't a part of it, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important.
That's why I love Professor Skip Gates. In his program, he had Finding Your Roots, and he'll take people and he would take them back as far back into their family roots, and to the point where he can do DNA and kind of almost attach them to people that were born in the continent of Africa, and it's so interesting when he's able to connect folks, and sometimes they find out they do have people of color that's in their family lineage. Their lineage is right there. It's almost like we all may got here on different ships, but at some point, if we go far enough back, we're gonna find ourselves having more connections than some people are comfortable with. And that's one thing about looking into our ancestries, is how far we can go back in reference to that. And that slavery is it's a fascinating subject in reference to just the suffering, but also the amount of heroic steps that people had to take to survive. And it speaks to so many elements of oppression, and at the same time seeking freedom, and finding ways to create your own form of communication through singing of spiritual songs, and folks not knowing that's a call that Moses is coming through. And that train gonna be leaving in the morning, it'll be leaving at night. So if you want to get on that train, you better come on now, and stuff like that. It's just a matter of how different groups have been able to look at an issue that overall, like one of the most, when I look at history and the people that was totally abolitionists and did not believe in the bondage of another human being, and they fought against slavery at their own peril, at their own risk, because they knew that when Harriet Tubman was doing her underground runs, her train stops would be at many of their homes, and they would hide runaway slaves. They had all kinds of unique ways how they would hide them to help them get to freedom, and they did it at great risk.
they had been found out. They'd
Yeah,
have been,
they
they'd
would have been killed.
immediately.
But
Yeah.
they did at great risk, and it's like the historian, the presidential historian John Meacham always talk about that. When you look at this young country, this place we call America, it's still a very young country. We've always had this kind of tension within our country that could just tear it apart. But he refers to it as it is the better angels that we have in this country that nobody would never know. They just do things without seeking attention, you see. And those admonitions, those people that had that spirit in their soul to say, I see these conditions that's been happening to this group of people, and I need to do something. And they did. And I think even to this day, we always going to have folks that fit that description of better angels that helps keeps this fragile country from just falling apart.
Maybe that's the call out that we're making. Maybe we all need to be those angels.
We need to be. You're right.
I do think we need to, connect the trauma that was so apparent and that was caused by white, not just privilege but power. Mm-hmm. That we need to realize that trauma just doesn't heal itself.
Right.
It just and it takes more than just a conversation here and there to begin that healing.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to grapple with. We got to deal with.
Yeah. When you were talking about when like a law enforcement or police officer could drive by and you just see them as just part of the neighborhood. Yeah. And your black friends could kind of like, oh, they just kind of they get frozen. They just kind of get still. And we used to have that same experience when we would be walking. Well, back then they didn't have school buses. We would walk to school. Yeah. And we were just being guys, just laughing and joking and carrying on. But if we saw a police officer, and back then they used to walk the beat. So it's called walk the beat. And they walking down the street, maybe coming towards us, and we would get very quiet. We would just get quiet. Just stop for that moment being guys, just being teenage boys. We would get tired, almost walk like foot soldiers. And we would walk by. We wouldn't make any eye contact with them. We didn't want to draw any attention to ourselves. And we would just walk by them. And we could sometimes feel their stares, but we wouldn't look at them. We just walk by them, got to a safe distance, and then we go back to being normal again. You see, and is that kind of internal training you get from your parents and from other people in your neighborhood, which is just part of those things you have to do because of that systemic stuff that happens or has happened and probably continues to happen in our country. Like one thing people say all the time, police, law enforcement can visit your neighborhood, but they patrol my neighborhood. See what I'm saying? Yeah. So, and it could be totally untrue, but that's the factual thing that it's hard to separate, and saying in regard to, I feel personally, this is me personally speaking, sometimes I feel very sad for police officers because no matter how much they try to engage the public, put a good public image on the work that they're doing, which is needed, it seems like it's always something within their ranks, and I'm talking nationally, that'll kick them back. That some officers will do stuff that just makes the whole universal operation of law enforcement get another bad stain thrown at them. No matter how much good they do. I used to always get frustrated with officers that you see some news clip about them engaging kids playing kickball or basketball or doing something with kids on the playground. And they would show that as law enforcement engaging kids in the community. And I always say to myself, that's pretty cool. I wish they could do the same thing with teenage boys, rather than little children. Yeah. Get together with teenage boys, get together with grown African-American men and talk about life, Do it in the same way. But I've never seen it in my time. It would be great if they could. And maybe that's one of the message I hope people in law enforcement, when they talk about how do we how do we turn this thing around from being more accepted in communities that we've had historically issues with, is to begin to engage, to be really engage and recognize, as officers, you want to be able to do your job and go home to your family at the end of the day, like everybody else, right? And if you are patrolling or in my neighborhood, then you need to have some connection to people in the neighborhood, you see, and build that relationship. But, it's like I said, it seems to be every time just always something. There was something on the news not long ago, just probably last week, of another African-American young man that got taken to some police precinct or something, and then later on he was pronounced dead. And it's just like, when will this ever, ever, ever stop? You see? So it's something that, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, because you and I can have this conversation.
But we need a lot of others to
Right,
have the conversation.
right. Why can't policymakers? Right.
That? Because what we're dealing with is, we've even said it in this first session, there's so many levels of what we ought to discuss. We can't discuss them all, and we can't solve them all.
Right.
But there is this level of violence. I mean, so the violence obviously is wrong. It has to stop. I mean, that's a visual understanding of how race is impacting the systems. So violence is one thing, but even after that, but again, I mentioned that I've never had a African American supervisor. So what am I now doing in my workplace? That's not a violent attempt, but it's still a systemic problem of whiteness and of sort of power and control and just how the systems are built. And so now, I'm not a part of that violence, but I need to be about speaking against it and how to resolve it. But more at home, what can I be doing in my workplace, in my church place, in my neighborhood, at other levels, even outside the violence? Because, we're not violent people.
Right.
But we still are called now to do something together and to have this conversation and to deal with the challenges that still confront us.
And that's what makes what we are doing together here, in my opinion, so unique. In reference that you as a white African, you as a white male, European descent, me as a black male, African descent, sharing this young land in this young country together. We have to operate by the laws and bylaws of the country together. We have to make sense of our policies and politicians and all the various elements that we are complied to do together. But yet it seems to be a certain it's not level to the point where we feel that we can move in a safe place together. We should. And I think that's what brings this issue about when we talk about men as a whole, regardless of the race, that men, when we think about America as a place, as a land, the amount of violence that we have as a whole, 99% of it rests with us as men. I don't care what color you call yourself, it's still a man, you see. And the amount of mass killings and just all of the harm that we as men seem to do to each other and to children and to women. At some point, we as a collective group, men, have to ask ourselves, why do we keep acting this way all the time? What is it about us as men that aggression and violence seem to be always right at the surface level of our emotional makeup, and we can just pop like that? And the question is, we got to take it back a little bit to our socialization, back to when we were children and how, and our parents, it's like when we're parents and we find out that the wife is carrying a boy, and we start conjuring up all of these ideas of how we want to raise that boy. I got a boy, which is different than how we feel as men when we know we got a daughter coming. You know, you think about pretty things and doll babies and paint the room pink and all of this kind of nice, soft, lovely stuff. But with boys, we got to go out and get the baseball bat. We got to get the football. We gotta make sure he's gonna be tough and rumble and ready to go. You know, and it's I don't know. I just over the years I just think that sometimes in our intent to raise our sons, it's done with good intentions, but if we aren't careful, we're just passing on those kind of tendencies that can make him so emotionally distant by the time he's a teenager. You know, how many parents? I'm trying to show how many parents that may be listening to this podcast right now. You saw that change in your sons when they hit the teenage years. They stopped communicating. They stopped sharing. And we just leave them alone, not realizing, no, we need to bring them closer. We really need to bring them closer. And we give, you know, so America has always had a certain freedom that we give boys and men. You know, even when we were, my daughter and my son, the son had a lot more freedom. He could kind of go as he come and phone calls, and no matter, we never questioned our daughter. We had to always say, find out, well, who's calling her? Who's that? Who's that? What's his name? I want to meet his parents, all of that kind of stuff. But we never would do that with our boys. You see, so sometimes I think we have put boys in a advantageous position that if they aren't careful, by the time they in their early 20s, could be a problem. And in my thinking, I think that sometimes that, you know, it's about relationships that, and I think men, when we talk about that emotional baggage that sometimes we don't know what to do with. You know, in relationships, it's all about emotions. But yet, society thinks men don't have emotions. We have a lot of emotions. Yeah. We don't show them. We're not sharing them. We don't talk about them, but we do. Yeah. And I think when a lot of men are in an emotional, sensitive place, for many of them, the only thing they knew to do is to react in an aggressive manner. Rather than saying, I need to go see somebody, I need to find a friend, I need to talk to somebody about what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, rather than keeping that stuff all locked up inside themselves, is what we call that man in the box, that loneliness. And you can't stay in that box for so long before you come out. And I think for a lot of men, sometimes that coming out is sometimes done with aggression.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned early on that we don't have all the answers and we're not experts, but you are rather the expert in man and boy issues. Mm-hmm. And I believe we have an upcoming podcast devoted maybe primarily to that, where I'll be interviewing you and you'll be able to share a little bit more about that. But I'm glad you went ahead on this one and began to explain some of those dilemmas that we have to face. Yeah. And I look forward to other conversations that will be coming about this. Yeah. And look forward to our work together.
Well, and you've already started to, and that's, we want everybody to understand that this is not just a warning of talking with you or talking about particular subjects that are important to us, but we will be bringing in a variety of guests, as many guests as we can get to have some time to be part of this presentations on a weekly basis, so that they can share their wisdom, share their perspectives on the world of men and how we can look at our world in regard to all of its elements, all the goodness that we can do, all the goodness we have done, all the things we can do better to make, again, as we say, to make our collective world, this place we call America, a better, safer place for all of us. But, you know, it's time that we take some sense of accountability for everything that we bring to the day-to-day existence of this place we call America, the good and the bad. And if we can do that together, then I think we can really start seeing some movements towards that goal of trying to have a perfect union. You see, it's not up to. I think sometimes we put too much. We rely too much on politicians fixing all of our social ills. That's up to all of us. You see, that's up to all of us. And as we, as a collective group of men, if we can buy into that us coming together, we can accomplish so much more. You know, and I always love to look at the so-called the normal guy, the everyday Joe, and then the so-called Christian man. You know, how much they may be different, how much they pretty much the same. You know, are men in the church any different from men outside the church? And if their principles of men in the church is to quote follow Jesus, then the men outside the church, are they any different? You see, and the men that are in a church or following a certain faith-based type of behaviors and principles, what are we doing to try to reach the men that are outside the church? You see, and how do you bring? It's, you know, we got all these little subgroups of men, rather than us just coming together as a whole, and being able to. How do we be that term? How can we all be my brother's keeper? You see, without having some label attached to it. You know, I may not belong to your country club, but I'm still a man that have just as many wants and needs and dreams as you. You see, and we got to find a way to break through all of these artificial tags we put on ourselves, and just be able to relate to each other as men. And I think if we could do that as men, then maybe we'll make the world a better place for our boys, our little boys, you see, because generation after generation after generation, you find those boys, by the time they young adults and then older, grown men, they keep doing the same thing. Yeah. And at some point, we got to be able to figure out how do we change it? How do we break it? How do we break this stuff? You know? That's where we are. So it's we could go on and on.
I look forward to our conversations together, and I look forward to other weeks that we have to explore issues that do divide us, but maybe some issues that come together for us, and ways that we can work together to promote healing, to go about justice, and to have some semblance of what reconciliation may mean.
Yeah, that's true. So we, White Feather Counsel of Men, we're going to be doing this on a weekly basis. We will be having the opportunity for folks that tune in to us to be able to email us if you have questions or comments, as well as to call in. We'll be doing that as well. And so we're looking forward to it. This is our initial presentation that kind of let you know who we are and what we want to try to do as a collective group. Let's say Juan and I, we are the gatekeepers. We opening the gate so that you can share and bring your ideas, your opinions that can move towards us having a universal conversation about us as men who share this place we call America. Okay. And if America can really, really make some significant changes for the world of boys and men, it has to begin with us. All of us. And doesn't cost you anything to just tune in, give us your opinions, give us your ideas. And if we could do that as a collective group together, I guarantee you it's going to filter right on up to the policymakers and the president's office and law enforcement's office and all of those people that are charged with being public servants that are supposed to be serving the people of America. The word's going to get to some of them. And if they can get to some of them, then others will get it. And then hopefully we can begin to really, really, really put boots on the ground as it relates to the world of men in America, because we got a lot of work to do. We can make it better. We can make it better, but it can only get better if we do it together. So that's what we want to do. That's what we want to do. Juan?
That's what we're after, and thank you for being here, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to
Me
it.
too.
Thank you.